There was a mega piece in the New York Times yesterday. I mean, it is thousands and thousands of words. And it's basically the New York Times politely admitting that ADHD has been wildly, overly diagnosed as a way to prescribe speed to kids. If I were to summarize it in 2 sentences, that would be it. A polite way for the New York Times to basically write a mea culpa on how the pharmaceutical industry has pushed kids to taking pills like Ritalin for ADHD. I will read some of this to you, but I'm glad this conversation is being had. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to be. I could pretend to be one on the radio, but that wouldn't be the right thing to do. I'm not going to do that. I will reach out to some of our friends in the medical field on this issue after the show wraps up today, because I think this is such an important issue. And I'm glad that the New York Times wrote this piece, and I will share it on social media in a little bit. But the headline reads as follows: Have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong? And I'm sure that many of you as parents, whether your kids are grown up, you're thinking back right now to when they were little, especially if you have boys, or if you have adolescents right now, you have little kids right now, maybe some of them have been prescribed this stuff. Maybe, you've thought about this stuff. Every parent has at some point or another with, I'm sure, at least one of their children. So the article headline from the New York Times, mega piece in the Sunday paper yesterday: Have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong? With diagnoses at a record high, some experts have begun to question our assumptions about the condition and how to treat it. And it starts off with how ADHD really became a thing in the early 90s. And as someone who's a millennial who grew up at that time, I remember, there were a handful of mostly boys growing up who were like on Ritalin. They were the kids who were a little crazy, a little wacky, not the best students. And they were like the Ritalin kids. And you knew that they were like the ADD, ADHD. At least that's what we were told, right? Now, they weren't like mistreated or anything, but you kind of knew who they were. So this becomes a thing in the early to mid-90s. But then the people who are diagnosed with ADHD start skyrocketing, which means, of course, the pills from the pharmaceutical companies start skyrocketing. And here are some of the numbers. Here are what they look like. And they talked to one doctor in particular out of California. And he said that he initially welcomed the initial increase in the diagnosis rate, but he thought that the ADHD diagnosis would plateau at about 3%. Instead, it kept rising, hitting 5.5% of American children in 1997, and then 6.6% in 2000. As time passed, he began to grow uneasy. He and his colleagues were continuing to follow the almost 600 children that they were studying in this MTA study that began in the mid-1990s. And they realized that by the mid-2000s, the new data they were collecting was telling a different and less hopeful story. A story that they should have initially reported, but they were not reporting. That after 14 months of treatment from, these prescribed drugs, the children taking Ritalin were behaving better than those who weren't. But by 36 months, 3 years, that advantage had completely faded. And that children in every group, including the comparison group, displayed exactly the same level of symptoms. So they were looking back on this study of kids they gave Ritalin to and kids they didn't give Ritalin to. And while there was, yes, a short-term gain for those who took Ritalin, after about 3 years, nothing changed, largely speaking in the study, between the kids who were taking it and the kids who were not taking it. This Dr. Swanson's now 80, close to the end of his career, and when he talks about his life's work, he sounds troubled. Not just about the results of this study, but about the state of the ADHD field in general. And now I've got some crazy numbers for you here as well when it comes to teenagers who are being diagnosed with ADHD. Remember, when they started this in the 90s, they thought the numbers would plateau at about 3% of kids who are labeled ADHD. Last year, according to the CDC, 11.4% of American children had been diagnosed with ADHD, a record high. That figure includes 15.5% of American teenagers, 21% of 14-year-old boys, and 23% of 17-year-old boys. 7 million American children have received an ADHD diagnosis, up from 6 million in 2016 and 2 million in the mid-1990s. Are we changing? Is the science getting better, air quotes? Or is there an awakening happening right now in the conversation? I think back to COVID when we were told about settled science. Remember all that? Oh, it's settled science. You cannot question. No.
How dare you?
You can't question settled science. Science is never settled. That's the point of it. It's always evolving. We're always learning more. And the most important thing for anybody in the field of science to do is to admit when there's new data, to reassess, and not necessarily admit when you might be wrong, but just say, hey, we've got new data that makes us think fill in the blank.
Doesn't mean you're wrong. That's right. It's just gathered information to say we have a body of work to compare against now.
Yes, that's it. All you've got to say is I've got new data that changes the results or changes the outcome or changes how we should look at fill in the blank issue, right? ADHD, whatever you want to call it. And maybe there's a different way to do it. But I'm telling you, I mean, I remember this as a kid, and it's obviously been going on now for the better part of 30 years, and it's awful right now where you've got millions of young people, largely boys, who are being pumped up with some of these drugs. Obviously, there are companies that are making a fortune off it, and it's, you know what? It's your prerogative to make money. I'm just saying there's a lot of parents, I think, who are getting leery of, first off, some of this stuff that's out there, the way it's been pushed on too many people for too long a period of time. And now if you've got a lot of data that shows you that when you're comparing kids who are on it to those who weren't on it, and after 3 years, the results are largely the same between both groups, well, what's the point of any of this right now? What are we doing here?
Kind of went on when I was in school because I got the Ritalin prescription for a while. I needed glasses. That's why I wasn't paying attention in class. And they set you alphabetically back in the day, so my last name starts with a V, so I'm at the back of the room, and I'm bringing stuff to do because I can't see. This kid's a problem back here.
Yeah.
He's his own little island.
Yeah. How many kids?
I needed glasses. We didn't even go to that point back then. And so it's probably more of the same.
And you know what? Boys are boys. Okay,
well, that one's popular with my mother, too. Yeah, boys are way different than girls.
We're all knuckleheads at some point or another.
Witness your trip down to the basketball thing, right? Or was it basketball?
Yes.
Right? You took the kids and you were the chaperone for the class.
I took Claire's class down to the Big 12 Women's Tournament. And as a father of 3 girls, it was a whole new world for me to take a bunch of 5- and 6-year-old boys to the bathroom when they're peeing on each other, basically. It's like, holy smokes.
So the restroom becomes a whole laboratory. It's like, what's this do?
Yeah.
Hey, I can turn this the other way.
Hey, let me stick my hand in the toilet, and, then I'm going to smear it on my buddy's shirt. It's like, we've got to stop medicalizing boyhood. And for too many people, they're looking to do that right now. 913-408-7957. I am glad the New York Times wrote this piece. It is well worth your read. It is very long and very in-depth, but at least the conversation is being had. 913-408-7957. Rick is a retired teacher. Go ahead, Rick. You're on KCMO.
Yes. Hello, Pete. From my perspective, what I saw, I retired 15 years ago, but from what I saw, it wasn't so much big pharma pushing it. It was parents wanting an easy way to calm their kids down.
Yes. I'm glad thank you. Rick, I'm glad you brought that up because you're right. We are in an environment, and this has also been going on and really has picked up over the last generation, where parents are looking for the easy fix and the easy way out. And when you're dealing with a child who, to say the least, can be a handful and who you want to see succeed, if a doctor says this pill will help them fill in the blank, focus in school, get better grades, your initial reaction as a parent is to say, I'm doing this to help them, right? And any parent can relate to that feeling. But the question is, at what cost? And is this really a problem that is going to persist? Is it part of growing into yourself as a child? Is it a phase? Those are all questions that we need to ask ourselves. And listen, no one's ever been a perfect parent. I'm not doing this like as a preachy thing. Trust me, I am far from and will never be the perfect parent. You try to do your best. We all try to do our best. And then you hope, the chips fall in a good place when all is said and done. That's all any of us can do. But Rick brings up a really good point. You have parents who are at their wits' end, who are saying to themselves, I just need something here. I've seen this firsthand. Not with this ADHD issue in particular, but with people who are at the end of their rope, dealing with children who they're just trying to help. And when people are at their wits' end, when they're emotional, when they feel like they don't have the answer, they're not doing it to harm anybody. They're doing it to try to help. But the question is always, at what cost? 913-408-7957. And that's what makes the conversation a difficult one for a lot of people. But as we get more of this science out there, and we get more of these studies out there, having studied things like Ritalin and some of the ADHD medicines going on a generation now, I hope this stuff gets published, and I hope it gets the attention that it deserves. Because it's long past time for us to be having these conversations, especially when it comes to young boys. Because they're the ones, it seems like, who get the brunt of the medication. And what do we have right now in this country? A crisis of young men. Young men who feel like the world has left them behind, the country has left them behind. Boys can't be boys anymore. And that doesn't mean that, they should be doing stupid, illegal things or anything of that nature. But they're going to be boys. And you can't medicate the boyhood out of boys. And we shouldn't be trying to do that either. Lots of your feedback, sharing this multi-thousand-word headline piece that was in the New York Times yesterday. And the headline reads here, have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong? With diagnoses at a record high, some experts have begun to question our assumptions about the condition and how to treat it. And it goes on to say here, as they've studied it over the years, and the Ritalin prescriptions have skyrocketed over the last 30 years, they've realized that, as we case study this stuff, we've come to the conclusion that oftentimes the kids who are on Ritalin are actually hurt more than the kids who just kind of, especially boys, need to work something through their system. 913-408-7957. Let's go to Jackie in Lewisburg. Hey, Jackie, you're on KCMO. Good morning.
Good morning, Pete. Thanks for having me on. I wanted to share a story that happened with my son. He was born in 1995, and I had a teacher say that she thought maybe he needed to be on Ritalin. He kind of had ants in his pants. And so I went to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said, well, Jackie, he's a boy. He says, tell me this. Can he sit down and watch a video like, a Toy Story Disney video? I said, oh, that's his favorite. He never moves. He sits right there, watches the whole thing. He says, I don't think he has ADHD. He said, if you want to try something, he said, Ritalin kind of is like caffeine. It kind of has the opposite effect on kids that are hyperactive. It calms them down, where people that don't have that problem, caffeine makes them hyper. He said, give them a Diet Coke and see if you notice a behavior difference. If it calms him down more, he says the caffeine will, calm him down. He said, you don't want him to have the sugar. And I never really needed to try that because he did pay attention to videos. He could sit still if it was something that interested him. His problem in school when he was younger is he didn't really want to listen to the teacher. He couldn't sit still. And, I do think that we over-medicate kids.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I appreciate that. That's an interesting and good piece of advice. I appreciate that. Let's go to Sandy in the Northland. Go ahead, Sandy.
Hi, Pete. Yeah, I just was telling Mark, on 169 going south down towards Gladstone, there's a high school there. I think it's a Christian something. But I noticed the other day that their outdoor soccer field or ball field has blue and pink outdoor toilets and one gray one. And I just thought that was very interesting.
All right. Great contribution, Sandy. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. 913-408-7957. Let's go to Keith in Belton. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I was just going to ask them, how many people think about the fact that they've gotten rid of recess in grade school and they've gotten rid of industrial arts in high school, and then they're surprised that the boys are acting up and they don't want to sit still? I mean, I hated sit-down classes when I was young, but I enjoyed getting up on my feet and doing things.
Yeah,
sports wasn't enough for me because I had asthma and I wasn't good athletically. Mm-hmm. But I was always good at fixing things, and I turned those hobbies and things into a career. I'm now an engineer. So, boys need to get up and they need to do something, not just sit there and look at a piece of paper or, worse yet, a tablet.
Yeah, you're absolutely, Keith. Nailed it, man. Now, Claire, they have a couple of recesses, but, kindergarten, different school districts, I get it. But as somebody notes here on the text line, Pete, a lot of this, too, is because it helps the teachers. It helps them just, manage what is sometimes up to 25, 30 little kids in the classroom. And isn't that part of a bigger conversation? Do we have an education system built for the 21st century? I don't think we do. We have a jobs program for adults. I think we have teachers who try their hardest to really make it work. It's not their fault. The system is beyond antiquated, but we're worried about hitting hours. Meantime, if you homeschool, it's amazing. I know people that homeschool, and the actual work that needs to be done is like 2 hours a day. But we've built this system that, frankly, is more of like a daycare system so parents can go out and work and pay taxes to the government to then go ahead and pay the employees who are basically watching their kids in what we call school. Like, boys, I don't think anyone at these ages need to be sitting there for 8 hours in a room every day. And that is a whole nother conversation that does need to be had at some point here. And I will continue with this conversation in the days ahead and get some experts in the field here in Kansas City on this, because I do think it's a critical issue. Brad Lemon, the Fraternal Order of Police president in Kansas City, will join us next and give us an update on the local officer who nearly died over the weekend on KCMO.
I'm here at the Ice Hotel with Brad McGee from LBA Home Services. Brad, why are we in Norway at the Ice Hotel?
Isn't it nice here in the frosty Norwegian air?
The parka makes it bearable.
Sure, you're cold now, but remember the heat we get in the summer back in KC?
I guess so.
You don't have to suffer through that. The AC technicians at LBA can get your house as cold as this.
So we'll have to wear a winter jacket inside?
If you want it that cold, yes.
I want to go home.
And you want your home to be cool and comfortable. Everyone at LBA thinks this way. Either your home is the perfect temperature or we need to make it that way.
Okay, you've made your point.
Don't be a baby and have a drink. Besides, you're part of LBA's perfect service family, so you're already covered by our scheduled maintenance package, which means every summer your home can be like the Ice Hotel.
Brrr.
Another round of Aquavit. Skull!
One simple idea, one name to remember.
Just remember
LBAservices.com.
Trust your lawn to Ryan Lawn and Tree and enjoy a worry-free, effort-free, weed-free lawn. Get a free estimate at ryanlawn.com/no-weeds. New customers save 50% off their first application. That's ryanlawn.com/no-weeds.
Casey.